When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Big Game. User, RG20. Posted, April 12, 1998.
Where's the best place to watch the sunset? Well, it's impossible for me to say exactly how many times a day, as a park ranger, I get asked this question. The number is easily in the double digits, triple during peak season when the park bulges at the seams with tourists from all over the world. It's such an infuriating fucking question. Can you see the sky? There. You found it. Sit down, shut up, and enjoy. Every single time someone says those words to me, it's all I can do to stop myself from snapping their windpipe just to hear the dry whistling sound it would make. Of course, I don't actually do that because I'm not crazy. A psychopath? Probably, but not crazy. I have self-control and zero desire to get caught. For example, I'm not going to tell you which park I work in, so no one out there can rat me out or ruin my fun. What fun is that? The answer to that will probably surprise you in more ways than one. For example, did you know that a non-zero number of people are murdered in national parks every year? And if you ever try to get specific information out of the NPS, they'll stonewall you until you get bored or crumble to dust. Our park has rentable dormitories for climbers, hikers, or anyone else who wants to stay overnight but can't afford any of the hotels within an hour's drive. It sounds like a great deal, and it is, unless you happen to end up bunking next to one of the people driving those numbers up. For the record, that's not me. I love my job. I love these parks and consider it my personal duty to keep them safe. I will never hurt someone who doesn't deserve it. Calls from the dormitories provide me with more than enough people who deserve it to keep my cravings satisfied. Getting your own cabin as a park ranger takes a long time. It took me years to work my way far enough up the chain to the point where I qualified. Now that I have it, it was worth every single moment of waiting, and that's not just because the land around it finally gave me a single place to bury people who would do harm to others. It also gave me room to finally build the tickle trunk. Only the baddest of hombres get to go in there, like Mr. Run and Gun. Mr. Run and Gun caused a stir in the park last summer when he rolled through an orange Pontiac Firebird. It was summer, and he thought he could kidnap himself a hiker and light out for parts unknown without raising an alarm. Like so many of these jokers, Mr. Run and Gun wasn't so good at planning. or situational awareness, and an entire group of Canadian tourists saw him bundle a young blonde woman into the back of his gaudy shitmobile at gunpoint. In one of those little twists of fate that only happens with good luck and bad fiction, among those Canadian tourists was a championship sprinter who ran like hell to the nearest ranger station. A call went out immediately, alerting all rangers that we had a kidnapping. The gap between my car's radio squawking out that message and the collision that caused me to drop a half-eaten fruit cup into my lap was maybe 3 minutes. I had been parked in a pullout area a couple miles away from where it had happened, the engine running in case our guy made an appearance and I had to give chase. The pullout was at the far end of a curve, but a gradual one, unlike the hairpin turns further up near one of the trailheads. My assumption was that if he came down the mountain my way and went off the road anywhere, it would be one of those. How wrong I was. The impact came on the rear driver's side, sending my car careening through the wooden guardrail partway over the embankment. If he had hit the front of the car and put the weight of the engine over edge, I'd have died rolling down into the valley. Instead, I was covered in preserved fruit and shattered glass, absolutely fucking furious. Then he shot at me. I spun around in my seat to see the crumpled front end of a two-door sports car painted a shade of orange that would have been offensive to radiation burns. Beyond that, a chubby idiot with greasy skin and a pompadour was frantically working the ignition, trying and failing to get the engine to turn over. Next to him was a blonde woman, a blindfold tied tightly around her head. Chubby looked up from his pointless attempts to resurrect that rolling turd he called a car and locked eyes with me, taking in my cruiser and uniform. A heartbeat later, and he was pointing a Saturday night special my way, firing 3 shots, one of which blew off my side view mirror, 2 others plowing into the rear passenger side door. That's when Chubby became Mr. Run and Gun, and I decided that his days on Earth were over. I drew my weapon before very quickly realizing there was no way I could return fire and guarantee the hostage's safety. She was crying loudly, great heaving sobs that seemed to be having the effect of scrambling her kidnapper's ability to think on the fly. Mr. Run and Gun kicked the door open and, true to his name, started running back up the way he'd come. The stupidity of this man was staggering. I could have shot him in the back and been done with the whole thing. I'd have stashed him in my trunk, put him in my freezer till he got nice and firm, then broke out Hacksaw Jim Diggin to cut him up before burying him in my yard. It wasn't what I wanted. For causing me all this hassle, I wanted to be looking in his eyes when the lights went out. I carefully pushed my door open, broken glass crunching underfoot as I got out of the cruiser. After making sure the hostage was safe, I left her still blindfolded and told her help was on the way. From there, it was time to catch up to my quarry. One of the great things about being a ranger is you stay in shape. You're always hiking, climbing, or in my case, chasing down scumbags before hitting them till stuff runs out their ears. Mr. Run and Gun was definitely light on the run half of his name, thick legs struggling to climb the steep grade while that stupid hair of his bounced. If not for the gun, still potentially holding up to 3 rounds, I could have closed the gap in seconds. He wheeled and fired another 2 shots. One spanged off the asphalt, maybe a foot in front of me. The second went wild, shattering glass. A look behind me showed that it had found its way to his car, collapsing the rear window on its way to below the hostage's brains all over the dash. Fuck. This son of a bitch just earned himself a trip to the tickle trunk. While Mr. Run and Gun was staring open-mouthed at his handiwork, I drew my sidearm and fired a shot into his leg. The force of the impact caused him to collapse, his .38 clattering onto the ground. I carefully picked it up and put it into my pocket before giving myself permission to enjoy stomping his idiot body over and over. He cried out, first for mercy, then wordlessly. I kept going until I heard the telltale crack of his other leg breaking. Satisfied he wasn't going anywhere, I hustled back to my cruiser and pulled my goodie bag out of the trunk. It took hours to sort out everything that happened on that road. My statement is no doubt on file if you know where to look. It reads something like this. The suspect crashed his vehicle into mine, firing 3 shots at me before fleeing on foot. I gave chase, at which point he fired his 3 remaining rounds, one of which struck and killed the hostage. I drew my own weapon and fired a single round, striking him in the leg. The suspect turned away and continued fleeing, forcing me to choose between shooting him in the back or giving chase. Being a fine, upstanding government employee, I chose the latter, losing him on the trailhead up the road. As far as the sheriffs and my superiors were concerned, I had done everything I could. Tragically, the suspect was believed to have succumbed to the elements, as he was never found. Neat, tidy, tragic. These are the ways people like their endings, and in the case of Mr. Run and Gun, that's exactly what they got. John Q. Public doesn't need to know about the syringes and special sleepy time cocktail I keep in my goodie bag. They really don't need to know that the whole time the tow truck was dragging my car back onto the road, he was snoozing away, bound and gagged in the trunk. Most of all, they wouldn't understand the grand finale. Did you know you can order live cockroaches through the mail? They don't take up nearly as much space as you might think. For example, 1,000 of them can easily fit in a 10-gallon container. As a rule, they only eat dead flesh, unless they're really hungry, at which point they'll eat anything, whether it's moving or not. I bet you didn't know that. Mr. Run and Gun sure found out. That's what makes the tickle trunk so great. It looks like any old footlocker pushed up against the wall of my cabin, yet it's also a teaching tool. The offending party goes in. I padlock it shut, a sliding metal hatch on top, which just happens to be the right fit for a 10-gallon container, gets opened, and in go my 1,000 or so roach friends. Once they're all tucked in there, I close the hatch again and wait for the screaming to stop. It can go on for hours. Mr. Run and Gun didn't last even half as long as some of his contemporaries, adding one more disappointment to an already impressive resume of failure. It's a better end to the story than the police got, but they wouldn't understand. Few people do. But I think you get it. I think if you could, you'd have a tickle trunk of your own.
Subject, Hypochondriac. User, 6scaralt. Posted, August 2nd, 1998.
It started like every flu I'd ever had. Fever, a dull ache behind my eyes, chills that shook me awake in the middle of the night. But quickly, this, whatever it was, became something much, much worse. Illness has always been complicated for me. Growing up, my mother was a severe hypochondriac, haunted relentlessly by the memory of my father collapsing from a fatal heart attack at only 42. After his sudden death, she was left alone to care for me and my two younger siblings, a crushing responsibility that pushed her toward paranoia. Every sniffle was pneumonia, every stomach ache, appendicitis. We were dragged to the doctor repeatedly, each time subjected to prodding hands and sympathetic eyes that inevitably turned skeptical. She's fine, they'd always say. Just keep her hydrated and maybe take an aspirin. Yet, my mother's anxious vigilance persisted, leaving me numb to the notion of sickness. As a result, I learned early on to distrust my body. Not because it ever failed me, but because it never matched my mother's relentless, anxious fears. It's truly a horrible lesson to learn, but how could it not have happened in such circumstances? I'd either be a hypochondriac myself or rebel against the physical entirely. By the time I reached adulthood, it was that stubborn resistance that prevailed, a belief that sickness was something to overcome with willpower. "I'll sleep when I'm dead" became my mantra. I refused to miss work or cancel plans. Headaches were manageable with an aspirin and hydration. Fevers were temporary annoyances, something to sweat through, never a reason to halt my daily grind. And so, when this particular flu struck, it seemed no different. A nuisance, sure, but manageable. Honestly, I'd gotten sick before plenty of times. I knew that I'm not Superman, but something about this was off. My throat burned, sure, and my head throbbed with each beat of my pulse, but beneath the typical misery lurked a sensation far stranger. A crawling itch just under my skin, as if hundreds of tiny insects scurried through my veins. For the first time in at least 2 years, I called into work and locked myself in my apartment till I could will myself back to health. Over the next few days, the symptoms started to escalate, though. Fever spiked to delirious heights, and I spent several nights thrashing in sweat-drenched sheets, dreaming vividly of dark places and monstrous shapes. I was burning hot and needed the air conditioner blaring, but also wanted to be under all the blankets I owned. Still, I fought through it, swallowing pills and forcing myself upright. But each day felt heavier, not better, my body betraying me in ways it never had before. Every movement hurt. My bones felt brittle, my joints swollen and stiff. Time became nothing, and hope started to evaporate. Yet, if this wasn't enough to call someone for help, the relentless feeling of something growing inside me, stretching, writhing, whispering, should have been. When I finally stumbled to the mirror after God knows how many days, hoping cold water might break the fever's grip, I froze at the reflection staring back. My skin had taken on a waxy sheen, pale and translucent, and beneath it, my veins bulged grotesquely like twisting vines. Worse yet were the lumps, faintly visible beneath the surface, shifting and pulsing, multiplying before my horrified eyes. My heart pounded as panic surged, pushing adrenaline through my blood, my eyes tearing up, but even this natural reflex felt twisted now, alien. I leaned closer to the mirror, watching in silent horror as something dark slithered across my cheekbone beneath the skin. My shaking hands rose, fingers pressing urgently, chasing it, trying to stop the movement, but it slipped away, deeper into the flesh of my face, out of reach but undeniably real. In that very moment, my mother's voice echoed hauntingly clear in my memory. "I told you something was wrong. You never listened." But I pushed her imagined reprimand away, still convinced this was some twisted extension of her paranoia, even though I knew, deep down, this was different. That night, the feverish dreams took hold in ways I had never experienced. They were a chaotic nightmare of sensation and sound. When I woke drenched, I thought it was sweat, but the pillow beneath me was stained crimson. Panic surged. My fingernails were cracked and bloodied. At some point, I had unconsciously been scratching at myself, frantically clawing as my body sought escape from whatever dwelled within. Then, this morning when I awoke, I found thin fissures opening slowly, methodically across my limbs and torso. They bled a viscous fluid, thick and dark, and from these openings emerged thread-like tendrils, exploratory at first, then bolder, weaving themselves together in pulsing organic cords that wrapped me tighter, squeezing muscle, bone, and nerve alike. There is something alive inside of me. This is no flu. Something is growing. Something is using my flesh, my blood. I need help now. Can someone out there please help me? These tendrils are wrapping around my arms and legs as I type, silently protruding out of my insides and overtaking me like ivy on an abandoned building. I would scream for help if I could, but I no longer have the energy. I no longer have the strength. Someone, anyone, help. This is not the flu, and I'm not making this up.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.